At the end of World War II in 1945, the world was left devastated, with much of Europe and Asia in ruins. Cities lay in rubble, industries were destroyed, and economies were on the brink of collapse. Yet, amid this widespread destruction, the United States stood as an economic colossus, ready to take its place as the world's dominant economic power. How did this transformation happen? The answer lies in a combination of factors including geography, industrial capacity, technological innovation, and strategic policies that allowed the U.S. to not only recover quickly but to emerge stronger than ever. Before the war, the United States was already the world's leading industrial power. However, the demands of the war accelerated American industrial production to an unprecedented level. Between 1940 and 1945, American factories shifted from producing consumer goods to manufacturing war materials at a massive scale. Tanks, airplanes, ships, ammunition, and other military supplies were churned out in enormous quantities. This industrial boom not only supplied American troops but also equipped Allied forces through programs like Lend-Lease. One major advantage for the U.S. was its geographical isolation. Unlike European countries that were bombed heavily and saw widespread destruction of their industrial base, the U.S. mainland remained untouched by enemy attacks. This meant that American factories could operate continuously, unhindered by the disruption of warfare. The vast natural resources available in the country, combined with a large skilled workforce, allowed the U.S. economy to grow rapidly even as much of the world's economy was in tatters. The war effort also led to technological advancements and improvements in manufacturing processes, many of which had lasting impacts on the post-war economy. Innovations in mass production, assembly line techniques, and new materials increased efficiency and productivity. After the war, these technologies found new applications in civilian industries, fueling economic growth and improving living standards. Moreover, the federal government played a key role in managing the economy during and after the war. Massive government spending on defense created millions of jobs and boosted incomes, leading to increased consumer demand. The GI Bill, passed in 1944, helped returning veterans access education and housing, contributing to a growing middle class and expanding the consumer economy. This set the stage for decades of prosperity. Once the war ended, the U.S. government took the lead in global economic reconstruction. One of the most significant initiatives was the Marshall Plan, announced in 1947, which provided billions of dollars in aid to rebuild European economies devastated by war. This aid helped revive trade partners, stabilize economies, and prevent the spread of communism in Western Europe. It also secured American political and economic influence on the continent, creating a foundation for future alliances. By investing in the rebuilding of other nations, the U.S. not only demonstrated its leadership but also created demand for American goods and services. European countries needed American machinery, technology, and raw materials, which stimulated U.S. exports and maintained its economic momentum. Another factor was the dollar's role as the world's primary reserve currency after the war. The Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 established a new international monetary system where many currencies were pegged to the US dollar, which was convertible to gold. This system enhanced the dollar's global dominance, encouraging international trade and investment through the stability it provided. American financial institutions and businesses benefited enormously from this arrangement, further solidifying the country's economic supremacy. The U.S. also benefited from its position as a leader in science and technology after the war. Research funded by the government during wartime laid the groundwork for advances in fields such as aerospace, electronics, and nuclear energy. These innovations spurred new industries and jobs, keeping the U.S. economy dynamic and competitive. In the 1950s and 1960s, the American economy entered a golden age of growth. Consumer spending soared as millions of Americans bought homes, cars, and new appliances. Suburbanization expanded, and new highways and infrastructure projects reshaped the country. The expansion of higher education and technological industries kept the workforce skilled and productive. All these factors stemmed from the strong economic foundations laid during and immediately after World War II. However, the rise of American economic power was not without challenges. The Cold War rivalry with the Soviet Union required sustained military spending, which sometimes strained resources. Global competition grew over time as other nations rebuilt and industrialized. Yet, the post-war economic policies and the robust industrial base allowed the U.S. to maintain its position as the world's leading economy for decades. In summary, the United States emerged from World War II as the world's economic powerhouse because of its unparalleled industrial capacity, geographic safety, technological innovation, and strategic government policies. The ability to supply not just its own military but those of its allies transformed its economy. The Marshall Plan and Bretton Woods system extended American economic influence globally, while domestic policies created a prosperous middle class that fueled consumption and growth. This economic dominance became the foundation on which the U.S. built its military, political, and cultural leadership in the years to come. Military might from World War II victories to Cold War dominance. When World War II ended in 1945, the United States emerged not only as an economic giant but as the world's most powerful military force. The war had transformed the U.S. military into a vast, technologically advanced, and highly capable fighting machine. This unmatched military strength played a crucial role in establishing America's global dominance in the following decades, particularly during the tense and uncertain years of the Cold War. During the war, the U.S. military rapidly expanded from a relatively modest peacetime force into a global powerhouse. The Navy grew from a fleet of 290 ships in 1939 to over 6,700 vessels by 1945, becoming the largest and most powerful naval force in history. The Army and Marine Corps swelled with millions of soldiers deployed across multiple theaters from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific. The Army Air Forces, the predecessor of today's Air Force, also revolutionized warfare with strategic bombing campaigns and the introduction of long-range bombers and fighter aircraft. One of the most significant achievements of the U.S. military during World War II was the successful coordination of massive joint operations involving land, sea, and air forces. The D-Day invasion in Normandy under General Dwight D. Eisenhower showcased America's ability to plan and execute large-scale, complex operations alongside British and other Allied forces. This demonstrated not only military skill but also the capacity to lead and coordinate a diverse coalition. The development and use of nuclear weapons marked a turning point in military history and in America's military dominance. The Manhattan Project, a secret research program, led to the creation of the atomic bomb, which the U.S. dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. This unprecedented destructive power ended the war in the Pacific and immediately established the United States as the only nuclear superpower at that time. The psychological and strategic advantage gained by nuclear weapons reshaped global military balance and diplomacy. After the war, the U.S. military did not simply demobilize and shrink. Recognizing the emerging geopolitical threat posed by the Soviet Union, American leaders invested heavily in maintaining and modernizing the military. The National Security Act of 1947 reorganized the military, creating the Department of Defense and establishing the Air Force as a separate branch. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, was formed to gather intelligence, reflecting the growing importance of espionage in the Cold War. The Korean War, 1950–1953, was the first major conflict of the Cold War era and tested America's military readiness. Although fought under the banner of the United Nations, it was effectively a battle between US-led Western forces and Communist North Korea backed by China and the Soviet Union. The war showcased America's ability to project power rapidly overseas and to fight a limited war in the nuclear age. While the conflict ended in a stalemate, it reinforced the U.S. commitment to containing communism globally. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. military continued to advance technologically and expand its global reach. The development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, nuclear submarines, and strategic bombers ensured America's ability to deliver a nuclear strike anywhere in the world, a capability known as mutually assured destruction, MAD. This deterrent strategy aimed to prevent any nuclear war by making the cost of such a conflict unimaginable. The creation of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949 further solidified the U.S. military's global leadership. As the dominant member of this alliance, the U.S. committed to the defense of Western Europe against potential Soviet aggression. Military bases were established across Europe, Asia, and other regions, providing the U.S. with unparalleled global presence. This network allowed rapid deployment of forces anywhere in the world, reinforcing American influence and security commitments. During this period, the U.S. also developed special operations forces and enhanced its technological edge through research in areas like aerospace, electronics, and cyber capabilities. The space race with the Soviet Union, sparked by the launch of Sputnik in 1957, was both a technological and military competition. Achievements such as the Apollo moon landing in 1969 showcased America's advanced scientific and engineering prowess, with military applications closely linked to space technology. The Vietnam War, 1955–1975, was a more complicated and controversial chapter in American military history. Despite superior technology and firepower, the U.S. struggled with guerrilla warfare and political challenges. The war exposed limits to American military power and led to debates about the proper use of force in foreign policy. Nonetheless, the military learned important lessons in counterinsurgency, air mobility, and joint operations. Throughout the Cold War, the U.S. military's strength was not just about numbers and technology but about global strategy and alliances. The concept of forward presence meant maintaining troops and bases worldwide to deter Soviet expansion. Military aid programs helped allies build their own defenses, creating a network of partners. The U.S. also led in international peacekeeping and humanitarian missions, reinforcing its role as a global security guarantor. By the end of the Cold War in the late 1980s, the U.S. military had firmly established itself as the world's most advanced and capable force. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 left America as the unrivaled superpower, with unmatched economic and military strength. This dominance allowed the U.S. to shape international affairs for decades, intervening in conflicts, promoting stability, and responding to new threats like terrorism. In summary, America's rise to military dominance after World War II was a product of rapid wartime expansion, technological innovation, strategic foresight, and sustained investment in global alliances. The lessons learned from World War II, combined with the strategic challenges of the Cold War, shaped a military force that was ready to project power anywhere in the world. This military strength was a key pillar in America's overall global leadership, underpinning its economic and political influence and securing its place as the most powerful nation in the post-war era. Political influence, building alliances and leading the world order. After the devastation of World War II, the global political landscape was shattered and uncertain. The old European powers were weakened, colonial empires were beginning to crumble, and two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stood poised to shape the future. In this context, the United States moved swiftly to establish itself not only as a military and economic powerhouse but as the central political leader on the world stage. Its political influence in shaping the post-war order was a defining factor in its rise as the world's dominant country. The first major step in consolidating this influence was the creation of international institutions designed to foster cooperation, peace, and economic recovery. The United Nations, UN, established in 1945, was intended to prevent future global conflicts and promote diplomacy. The U.S. played a leading role in founding the UN and secured a permanent seat on its Security Council, giving it a powerful voice in international decisions. Through the UN, the U.S. sought to legitimize its leadership role and promote values of democracy and human rights. Another critical political move was the establishment of the Bretton Woods system in 1944, which created the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. These institutions were designed to stabilize the global economy, promote international trade, and provide financial assistance to rebuilding nations. With the US dollar at the center of this system, the United States effectively set the rules for the new economic order, reinforcing its political dominance by linking it to economic control. Central to America's political strategy was the containment of Soviet influence and communism. This policy, famously articulated by diplomat George Kennan, became the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy for decades. The Truman Doctrine, announced in 1947, pledged to support free peoples resisting subjugation, effectively committing the U.S. to intervene politically, economically, and militarily wherever communism threatened. This doctrine laid the groundwork for a series of alliances and interventions that expanded American influence globally. One of the earliest manifestations of this policy was the Marshall Plan, which not only revived European economies but also aligned Western Europe politically with the U.S. By providing financial aid, the U.S. fostered political stability and encouraged the adoption of democratic institutions. This helped create a bloc of allied nations firmly in America's sphere of influence, setting the stage for long-term political partnerships. The formation of NATO in 1949 was another landmark in solidifying American political and military leadership. This collective defense pact between the U.S., Canada, and Western European nations was both a deterrent against Soviet aggression and a symbol of American commitment to Europe's security. It marked a clear division in the world, with Western democracies on one side and the Soviet-led Eastern Bloc on the other. Beyond Europe, the U.S. extended its political reach through alliances and support for friendly regimes in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. The Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, SEATO, formed in 1954, was aimed at preventing communist expansion in Asia. In Latin America, through the Organization of American States, OAS, the U.S. promoted political cooperation and sought to counteract leftist movements. These alliances expanded the US's global network of influence far beyond its borders. The Cold War period also saw the U.S. engage in covert operations and intelligence activities to protect its political interests. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, established in 1947, played a major role in political interventions, including coups and support for anti-communist groups. These actions often reflected the U.S. determination to shape political outcomes worldwide in favor of democracy and capitalism, although they sometimes led to controversy and unintended consequences. Domestically, the U.S. political system supported this global leadership through a mix of bipartisan consensus and public support for containing communism. The American public largely accepted increased defense spending and foreign aid as necessary to protect national security. Political leaders used the rhetoric of freedom and democracy to justify involvement abroad, linking American identity to global leadership. Furthermore, the US's commitment to rebuilding and leading the Western alliance system helped shape the democratic institutions that emerged in post-war Europe and elsewhere. This effort stabilized political systems and fostered economic growth, which in turn reinforced U.S. political influence. The emphasis on democratic governance, rule of law, and human rights became central themes of American foreign policy and helped legitimize its leadership role. As decades passed, this political influence evolved to meet new challenges. The civil rights movement at home and changing attitudes abroad influenced America's approach to leadership. While Cold War confrontations continued, the U.S. also engaged in arms control agreements, diplomatic summits, and efforts to reduce tensions. The political landscape became more complex with the emergence of new powers and shifting alliances. In essence, the political influence of the United States after World War II was the result of deliberate strategies that combined military power, economic strength, and diplomatic skill. By building international institutions, creating alliances, and promoting democracy, the U.S. positioned itself as the architect of a new world order. This leadership role allowed America not only to contain its rivals but also to shape global politics in ways that supported its values and interests. The success of this political strategy solidified the U.S. as the world's preeminent power throughout the Cold War and into the modern era. It demonstrated that true influence requires more than military might or economic strength alone. It demands vision, diplomacy, and the ability to build lasting partnerships. The United States' political leadership in the post-war world remains a defining chapter in its rise to global dominance. Cultural impact: the rise of American soft power. While economic strength, military might, and political influence formed the pillars of America's post-World War II dominance, its cultural impact played an equally crucial but often less visible role. The rise of American soft power, its ability to influence other countries through culture, ideas, and values, became a defining feature of the United States' global leadership in the second half of the 20th century. After the war, the world was eager for new ideas, entertainment, and lifestyles, especially in countries recovering from years of conflict and repression. American culture, with its emphasis on freedom, innovation, and prosperity, offered a compelling model. Through music, movies, fashion, technology, and consumer products, the United States exported a way of life that captivated millions worldwide and helped shape global perceptions of power and modernity. Hollywood was at the forefront of this cultural wave. The American film industry, centered in Los Angeles, became the world's dominant producer of movies, shaping narratives about freedom, heroism, and democracy. Films like Casablanca and later Gone with the Wind were not just entertainment but cultural exports that spread American ideals. During the Cold War, Hollywood also produced films that highlighted American values and subtly promoted anti-communist messages, contributing to the ideological battle for hearts and minds. Music was another powerful cultural export. Jazz, blues, and later rock and roll emerged from the United States and became global phenomena. Artists like Louis Armstrong, Elvis Presley, and later the Beatles, who were influenced by American music, revolutionized popular culture and youth identity around the world. These musical genres symbolized freedom and rebellion, resonating especially with young people living under authoritarian regimes. American consumer goods and lifestyle also captured imaginations globally. The rise of brands like Coca-Cola, Levi's jeans, and McDonald's introduced people to the idea of American-style consumerism and convenience. The growing availability of televisions and radios spread American news, entertainment, and advertisements into homes across continents, making American culture a daily presence worldwide. Technological innovations further enhanced American cultural influence. The space race, highlighted by the Apollo moon landing in 1969, was not only a scientific achievement but a cultural milestone that inspired awe and admiration globally. Television coverage of this event broadcast American technological leadership directly into living rooms around the world. Similarly, advances in computers, telecommunications, and eventually the Internet would later cement the US's role as a global cultural and technological trendsetter. American education and intellectual life also contributed to soft power. Many international students came to study in U.S. universities, bringing back ideas and forming networks that spread American influence. The openness of American society to innovation, free speech, and academic freedom attracted thinkers and creators from all over the world. Diplomacy also included cultural exchange programs sponsored by the U.S. government and private organizations. Jazz tours, art exhibitions, and educational exchanges helped promote mutual understanding and goodwill, often countering negative stereotypes and propaganda from rival powers. These efforts humanized America and built bridges beyond official politics and military alliances. The appeal of American culture was not without criticism or resistance. Some saw it as cultural imperialism, eroding local traditions and promoting consumerism. Others were wary of the political messages embedded in cultural exports. Nevertheless, the pervasiveness of American culture created an undeniable influence that shaped global values, tastes, and aspirations. The Cold War competition extended beyond military and economic spheres into this cultural battleground. The US and the Soviet Union both used culture as a tool to promote their systems. However, American culture's ability to adapt, innovate, and appeal broadly often gave it an edge. The freedoms celebrated in American art, music, and media contrasted sharply with the censorship and restrictions in many communist countries. In the decades following World War II, this soft power helped sustain America's global leadership by creating positive perceptions and goodwill among foreign populations. It helped open markets for American goods, fostered alliances based on shared values, and built a cultural environment favorable to U.S. political and economic interests. Even as new global powers emerged in the 21st century, the foundations of American soft power established in the post-war era continue to influence international relations. The global spread of English as a lingua franca, the worldwide popularity of American entertainment, and the ongoing appeal of American ideals of freedom and opportunity are all legacies of this period. In conclusion, the United States' rise as the world's most powerful country after World War II was not just about military force or economic dominance. Its cultural influence, the soft power wielded through ideas, values, and lifestyle played a vital role in shaping a global order that looked to America for leadership. By exporting its culture, the U.S. connected with people around the world on a personal level, building relationships and influence that strengthened its position in a complex and changing world.